So I have a pound of butter in the bowl of my stand mixer, and that has got a paddle attachment on it ready to go. I've got all my ingredients laid out. Got my flour, cornstarch, sugar, brown sugar, and this is a recipe adapted from John Pennell at the Preppy Kitchen. You can find this recipe on his blog, thepreppykitchen.com. I've doubled the recipe, and I've added an additional 1/4 cup of brown sugar on top of doubling that recipe. That wasn't in the original recipe. I find it gives it a little bit more of a caramel taste to it, and I like it. But yeah, it's a full pound of butter for the double recipe. I'm adding 2 cups of white granulated sugar into this butter. Then we're going to add 1/4 cup of light brown sugar. I buy the huge bags of brown sugar at Sam's. That seems to be the best price. I also buy the big bags of granulated sugar at Sam's too. Okay, and the key to getting a good cookie dough is creaming this butter and sugar together until it is almost white. You're going to let this go and go and go until it barely looks like butter anymore. This butter and sugar is going to cream, and it's going to aerate together, and it's going to become really light and fluffy. It's going to look like a cloud before you add the eggs to it. And if it doesn't look like a cloud, you're not ready to add eggs. So you want to make sure that your butter is really nice and creamy and fluffy. And while that is working, we're going to let that work a while. We're going to add the flour. Make sure you fluff your flour so that it's not densely packed down in the container. I also bought this flour container at Sam's. Normally I would level this cup off with a butter knife, but in this instance I did not have a free hand available. I was trying to film with my other hand. So I'm doing 3 cups of flour into the sifter at a time. This recipe uses, once it's doubled, it uses 8 cups of flour total. I like to sift mine into a Ziploc, sift my dry ingredients into a Ziploc, because 1, I hate dishes, and 2, once you get done with the Ziploc that you've used for your dry ingredients, you can then take that same Ziploc and place your dough that you've just made into it while you're rolling it. That way you don't have dough sitting out and getting a crust on it while you roll parts of the dough, because we're going to cut it into fourths once we roll it. My sifter will hold 3 cups of flour at a time, so I'm doing my 8 cups of flour in 3, 3, and 2 batches. 3 cups, 3 cups, and 2 cups. And I'm sifting all that flour together. And then I'm going to add my last 2 cups of flour. I'm also going to be adding 2/3 cup of cornstarch. This is the best trick that I have ever heard to keep cookies from spreading when they go into the oven. Have you ever put a snowman into the oven and then he came out looking definitely not like a snowman? This is going to give you those crisp, clean edges. John talks more about this in his video on his channel, but for cookie decorators, this is just the be-all, end-all. I also freeze my cookies once I get the dough rolled out. I roll the dough out at room temperature, which is different from what John does, but it's easier on my arms. So I roll my dough out at room temperature and freeze it, and that also helps to keep those nice crisp edges on my cookies. I'm also adding a teaspoon of salt to this before I finish sifting. And we'll check in on the butter right quick. That's looking really good. You can see that it's starting to get really fluffy and look more cloud-like. And it's not as yellow as it was when we first put it in. We're scraping down the sides of the bowl so that we don't have a bunch of butter hung at the top. We'll finish up sifting our flour here, and I take it straight from the Ziploc bag, and we're going to start adding our eggs. So we finish up doing the wet ingredients after we have creamed that butter, and it's nice and fluffy. Look how pretty and cloud-like that is. Now, I crack each egg into a separate bowl. I've got a good old toddler cereal bowl handy. And so I'm doing each egg individually into that bowl and then into the larger bowl. That way you don't have any shells. I use Dutch Farms grade A large eggs. I find these at my local Piggly Wiggly. You want to make sure they are extra large eggs because the texture won't turn out quite the same. If you can't get extra large, if you're using medium or small, definitely throw in an extra egg just to be sure. Here we're adding 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, mixing that right up. And now once we've got all our wet ingredients combined, we're going to start adding the flour just a little bit at a time. I like to start with a couple spoonfuls, probably about a cup to 2 cups at first. And I'm throwing a towel over the mixer, that way I don't have flour all over my kitchen. And I have learned recently that using a damp kitchen towel is much better. If you use a towel that's just been wet a little bit, it'll really save you from having to do a lot of cleanup later. So I just start adding a couple big tablespoons at a time. And you can see it's starting to combine. We're starting to add this slowly, that way we don't have all those little crumbs at the bottom of the mixture. And when you're doing a double batch like this, it's really important to make sure that you're not throwing in all your flour at one time because your mixer just can't handle it, or mine can't anyway. Mine is the 4-quart KitchenAid, and it's not technically made to handle this much dough, I don't think, but I've been putting it through a lot since my mama got it for me for my wedding shower 5 years ago. So I figured out little tips and tricks to help it do more dough at one time. So you can see that dough is starting to get much thicker. It's starting to kind of come together more. And this is not a super dry dough. It's one of the stickier cookie doughs out there, I think. So it's not going to be like super crumbly when it comes out of the mixer. It's still going to have a little bit of tact to it when it comes out today. And we're just continuing to add those little spoonfuls at a time. This is where those blades on your paddle attachment come in so handy. I just bought this paddle attachment from Amazon. I think it was like $14 or $15. I'll try and link that below, do like an affiliate link or something. But yeah, you can see the gray paddles on the edge there. They're so handy. They just scrape the sides of that bowl and make sure that you're getting everything in there. I'm scraping down that paddle attachment to make sure I'm getting all the good stuff where it needs to go. Are y'all OCD like this too? Can you not stand for even one speck to be left on the paddle attachment? I would save myself so much time if I would just let it go, but I can't do it. If there's a little bit left, I have to get it. Okay, anyway. So after we get that all scraped down and ready to go, we're going to add the rest of our flour. When I get down to about a cup left in the bag, I go ahead and add the rest to the mixer and just start mixing it on up. Put the towel back over it because you will have a mess. And this is a Kate Spade towel that I found at TJ Maxx. It has a recipe for something on it. I'm not actually sure what it is. I think it's a conversion chart on one side and a recipe chart on the other. And you can see once we've added that last little bit of flour, that dough has really started to come together and it's starting to cling to that paddle attachment. That's when you know it's ready and it's a good batch of dough. So here I'm scraping up any little bits of flour or dry ingredients that may be remaining at the bottom of the bowl. Sometimes you just have to give those a little encouragement to mix on in with the rest of the dough. Most of the time they do okay, especially with that paddle attachment that I was talking about that has the scraper, but sometimes you just have to help them get on in there. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the consistency of this dough. You can tell that this is ready and is good dough because it's soft, it's pliable, it's not too crumbly, but it also isn't like super wet. So when I peel a little piece away, you can see that that's really fluffy. It almost looks like really, really fresh Play-Doh. So that's how you know that it's really good dough. And I'll have a video coming soon about how I roll out my dough, how I freeze it, and how I bake it, all that stuff. In the meantime, you can follow me at Sarah Grace Cookie Co. on Instagram. You can also find me also with the name Sarah Grace Cookie Co. on Facebook as well. So thanks. If you have any questions, comment, send me a message. I appreciate y'all watching today. I'd love for you to check out some of the other videos I have. I have a lot about piping and royal icing and that kind of thing, but I plan on posting a lot more soon. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.